Yo, what's going on, everybody? How have you been? Very excited to have everybody here today. We've got this is going to go so poorly. We've got an assembly of fine, benevolent gentlemen that is ready to come on the show. It's been sad for me the past couple weeks. I've been traveling. I'm not been able to actually have a live Why Are We Bullish? It really got me bent out of shape. So we're gonna get rolling here, and I think you guys are gonna get a lot of benefit from this one. So I can't wait. We've got a solid group of gentlemen. Let's get this thing rolling. Of course, this is live. Anything could happen, so I defer to my pal Bill here.
We'll do it live.
Okay.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
If you haven't already, like, subscribe, share, all those things. They help a ton getting this content in front of more eyeballs. I am Ben with the Ben Sessions. This is your Daily Ben. What the fuck am I doing? Oh, God.
HODL the Bitcoin.
All right. Before we bring in everybody, let's take a look at where we are in the market right now. This is, if I can get it up here, this is timechaincalendar.com. We're sitting at $30,866 per coin. A single US dollar will pick you up 3,240 sats. In terms of fees, I mean, given that we've had a little price bump, really not that bad. Even with the mempool backed up by like almost 1.1 gigs, we're sitting at around 23 sats per byte. Next block, even if you're waiting a bit, still around the same range. It is purging anything below around 8.5 sats per byte. In terms of Bitcoin mined, 92.43% of all Bitcoin have been mined. That's 19.41 million of them. And then before we bring in everybody, shout out to sponsors of the show, HodlHodl.com. If you're stacking sats and you got a few priorities in mind, peer-to-peer trading, instant self-custody, no KYC, this is your easy, instant option. Sign up with nothing more than an email address. And once you get in there, choose a currency, a payment method, and an amount, and start viewing offers right away. You can start trading non-KYC sats peer-to-peer, no problem. They also do have a lending platform, nothing ever rehypothecated. Check them out. Link is down below. When you do get those non-KYC sats, you want to get them on something secure. It's no-brainer for me. CoinKite is kind of the place to go. The cold card is badass. The Mark IV is insane. They've got tons of other great stuff. Tap Signer, Sats Card, Block Clock, Open Dime. Coming soon. Cold Card Q1. Very excited for this one. Looks pretty badass. It's going to have QR scanning, stronger NFC, battery powered, dual SD card, all kinds of full keypad, everything. Anyways, if you want to reserve that or pick up anything else I mentioned, head to coinkite.com. Use code BTC Sessions for 5% off everything there. If you're looking to get beyond just single sig and you're looking to dive into perhaps multi-sig, Nunchuk have, I mean, first of all, Nunchuk Wallet by itself is awesome, but they have the Honey Badger assisted multi-sig, and basically they will hold a key as like your signer of last resort. You hold 3 other keys yourself. Super easy to set up on mobile. So things like the tap signer, the cold card, and a ton of other hardware options work for it. Again, really simple to use. It has baked in inheritance planning, so you can make sure your sats get to your next of kin without having to worry. And one of the best parts about it, also non-KYC. So unlike other options on the market where you have to provide all your personal information, this actually doesn't require personal information for you to sign up and make it work for you. So love the Nunchuk guys. They're killing it. Check them out, nunchuk.io. And last one here, shout out to Start9, your sovereign computing solution. I've recently consolidated. I had 5 nodes running because, you know, I make tutorials. And so I had a ton of stuff going. I've consolidated down to a single option. I'm now just running my Start OS, or I guess my Start9 Server One, as it is now called. But they just dropped a whole bunch of different options out there. Server Lite, Server One, Server Pro. or server peer. Anyways, basically you've got your entry level all the way up to your pro star, host your whole life on the thing. And it's pretty badass, I gotta say. They are really knocking it out of the park. They've got a ton of updates coming down the pike, and yeah, you can host everything here. Bitcoin Core, Lightning Node, mempool.space, join market. You can host data like files, photos, passwords, Nostr relays, Nostr clients. You can kind of do it all. So check them out. They're killing it. And yeah, start9.com. Anyways, I'm going to stop ranting. I need to get my how am I going to pun brethren? I'll let these guys, I'll let these guys decide. Anyways, we're going to welcome to the show Ben and Ben and Ben, and last but not least, Ben. Ben's welcome. How are you guys?
Doing good.
Good, thank
Doing
you.
great, Ben.
How are you?
Awesome. Well, Ben, it's good to see you all. Let's maybe do a quick round of intros to further specify what kind of Ben you are and what you do in your Ben time. So maybe I'll toss it to DeWall first. Dude, do you want to give yourself a quick intro? Who are you? What do you do?
Sure thing. Yeah, so I'm Ben, like everyone else. Bitcoiner since 2010. Been working in the space since 2017. Also on Zero since 2017. That is Zero Fiat. Probably best known at the moment, though, as the father of Sam the BTC kid. Awesome girl who was just on stage in Prague recently. So yeah, check her out on Twitter. If you're not following her already, you probably should.
A proud father moment, I've got to say. You know, she got up in front of a lot. I mean, Prague was a large conference, and she killed it. And that's awesome. I heard, you know, a lot of people were saying pretty great things. So hats off to young Bitcoiners making strides. So kudos to you for excellent dadding. No worries. Let's toss it down the line to Ben Gagnon. Dude, can you give yourself a little intro?
Yeah, happy to. I'm Ben Gagnon. I'm also known as Hash Override. I'm the chief mining officer over at Bitfarms, a publicly traded Bitcoin mining company. I've been mining full-time since 2015, and I've built Bitcoin mines in Taiwan, mainland China, the US, Canada, Paraguay, and Argentina.
Damn, dude, you've been busy, and you've spent a little bit of time in my neck of the woods. You've been kind of in and out of Calgary here and there. I don't know where in the world you are now. You don't need to disclose it if you don't want, but I'm sure we will be crossing paths at some point. So yeah,
I'm actually I'm in Costa Rica, just a couple hours north of Bitcoin Jungle.
Ooh, that sounds much more attractive than being in Calgary.
It's a bit nicer than Canada. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I can attest to that. But yeah, awesome. All right, let's toss it over to Kiwi. Dude, give yourself a little intro.
I am Ben, first and foremost. Been in Bitcoin since about 2017, working with Amber App. Wear a few hats over there. Some of the main benefits is the customer support, helping people with self-custody, nodes, wallets, miners, the rest of it, and recently became a junior dev as well.
Damn, that's awesome. That does sound like there's a lot of benefits over there. So kudos. Awesome. And we'll toss it down the line one last time to Schmidt, aka Bueno.
Yeah,
how are you, man?
Most people call me Schmidt. I was trying to play on the Ben and figured Bueno. Like, I got a few people calling me that. So I'm in Canada, the East Coast. I was raised in Nova Scotia, but I reside in New Brunswick now. Very much a pleb. About a year and a half into Bitcoin, still in the learning and that kind of stage. So definitely a little bit of imposter syndrome, hearing some of the amazing things that some of these people have already done. But happy to be here.
Dude, glad to have you. And it was nice to actually hang out in person at the Canadian Bitcoin Conference last week. I had a good time. Did you enjoy it?
I booked that ticket without realizing it was Father's Day, and my father might be a bigger Bitcoiner than I am. And so it was pretty serendipitous, and we had just about the best Father's Day you could have had. So
yeah, it was nice. We got out. We had a good steak dinner with a bunch of us, and yeah, it was a good time. So glad to see you there. Awesome. All right. Well, Ben's, let's kind of get the ball rolling here. I mean, first of all, I have to already be giving a shout out to the chat. Jestifer from Amboss is in there, just like making sure that he makes note of every single pun is noted. And then what are the benefits? Ben's Yellow wants to be a part of this. He's very, very Jestifer saying muy bien. Ben nonstop. Ben, there's another Ben in the chat too. Ben Allen, awesome. So very excited for this gathering, and maybe we might even have some other Bens join us later. But we are Legion. We're here. We're bullish, and so the theme of the show for Why Are We Bullish? Really simple. We go by the 3 R's. Number one, somebody's going to drop a reason why they're bullish. Anything that's top of mind that you're excited about in and around Bitcoin doesn't have to be price. In fact, it seldom is in a lot of these shows. After somebody drops a reason why they're bullish, number two, we're all going to riff on that reason, comments, questions, whatever rabbit hole we decide to go down. And then 3, finally, we're going to rotate until everybody gets a turn. So reason, riff, rotate, we're off to the races. I am going to get us started. And so just for context, I was just traveling. I hit up 3 conferences in a 2-week period. I went to Prague. BTC Prague was amazing. I went to Oslo for the Oslo Freedom Forum put on by, the Financial Freedom Track put on by Alex Gladstein. And then I was in Toronto for the Canadian Bitcoin Conference. All of them were fantastic. It was awesome seeing everybody. It really kind of like invigorated me to get pumping out content and tutorials and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to focus in on some of my experiences with the Oslo Freedom Forum, and I guess the spillover from Prague to the Oslo Freedom Forum. And so one of the more impactful things that I kind of experienced between those two things was I had the honor of doing a keynote in Prague, and the keynote talk was about the Canadian trucker protest, namely what happened, how we set things up in haste, where we basically fucked up, and then what tools are available to us now to correct those missteps so that when it's actually an instance of lives being on the line, how do we correct so that 100% of funds get where they need to go and it's done relatively privately and safely? And so I basically did kind of a walkthrough of all of that on stage at in Prague. And there were a few really great people there that I had met previously at the Oslo Freedom Forum that were in Prague. One of them, her name is Luda. She's wonderful. She does a lot of work on human rights violations in post-Soviet states. And she actually used, it was the Canadian trucker protest that clued her into, oh, wow, Bitcoin can actually work when the legacy financial system fails me. And she was trying to get protective equipment just for civilians into Ukraine as things were kind of kicking off there. And she found that just like getting protective vests and like helmets so that people didn't, debris or get shot or whatever, just getting that type of stuff into the country was going to take weeks. But then she looked at the trucker protest. She's like, maybe Bitcoin will work. She got everything in on day 2 of the conflict. So it was like, it probably saved a lot of lives just by utilizing Bitcoin. And so in talking about it in Prague and saying like, here's what we did, this is kind of where things were done poorly, this is how I wish it would have been done, and correcting for that, I had a lot of human rights activists approaching me in Oslo saying, this is actually perhaps a solution to some of our problems. And I also had people that were already utilizing Bitcoin as a way to protest in adversarial or fundraise and protest in adversarial environments, realizing that their setups were not up to snuff and that they might want to make adjustments and shift from a singular Bitcoin address to solutions like BTC Pay Server and CoinJoin and other options and mutisig and things like that. And so I think we're on the cusp of people kind of one, waking up to the fact that Bitcoin can step in when, you know, this top-down financial system fails them. And two, that there are lots of tools to even further improve on just like using Bitcoin willy-nilly, which is like kind of the typical, oh, we'll just get a Bitcoin address. You can improve upon that quite a bit by just familiarizing yourselves with the tools that are available today. And three, it's all going to get a lot easier to be secure and private with Bitcoin as time goes on. The tools are going to continue to get better. So that's kind of why I'm bullish, why I'm excited. And I'm again, what Gladstein has done with his financial freedom track at the Oslo Freedom Forum is impressive. And it's still, I like it because the event itself is not a Bitcoin event at all. Bitcoin is just there because it's a useful tool to be used in the background. And not everyone there gets it. Some people there oppose it, but I think over time it'll be harder and harder to ignore, and it'll become more and more clear why it's important. And I think it's important that Bitcoiners inject themselves into spaces where we understand that it can be helpful, and just fight that uphill battle of getting people to realize what this thing is capable of. So anyways, that's where I'm at. I'm going to open it up to you guys. Comments, questions, wherever you want to take it, go ahead.
Well, I was just curious, what is some of the pushback that you have heard when you're at those events? Like you said, not everybody's for it, so I'm just kind of curious, what are the concerns?
Yeah, so the concerns stem from almost kind of like a Western perspective of like, well, bad people will use it as well, right? And there's not a realization of the trade-offs made with the top-down system. If you live in a place where the government is relatively sensical and is not going to just like trample on human rights en masse, and you have a top-down financial system, then society more or less works relatively well. And then they can also clamp down on the little guys that are doing bad things, right? Quote unquote bad things, however they define it. But in the inverse, when you're dealing with a tyrannical government, if you still have that top-down financial system, that means that all the little guys that are pushing back against that also can be stamped out. And so I think it's more so because it's not even a question of if you want this to be the reality. It just is the reality now. Bitcoin exists and the world has to grapple with it. I think it's them parsing through the reality of it's a level playing field for all now. And also a lack of recognition of, you know, in a top-down situation, a bad government always has access to financial tools because they get to control the financial rails in that environment. And so everybody on the lower ends of that is at a disadvantage. So I think I even had a conversation with somebody saying like, well, we see a lot of ground up stuff, but if you could do top down and then just prevent the bad people, that's what we're in right now. That's the system. And so if you want to benefit the people that are like the most disenfranchised that need those tools, then it's basically a level playing field or nothing at all. So yeah, those are the pushbacks.
I'd be interested in you know, how much do the people pushing back against it actually understand about it? So, you know, like, do they have a lot of misconceptions, or do they actually understand it pretty well but still, you know, push back?
They don't understand it at all. Like there's very little, and it's not like most of the stuff I've encountered isn't too much of a pushback because they're seeing the benefits for some of the speakers there that come from areas where they know that the government is bad. And you know, Roya Mahbub, who lives in Afghanistan, who basically was running the women's robotics team. No women were allowed bank accounts, and she couldn't figure out how to pay the women that were working for her. And she started using Bitcoin in like 2014 or something like that. And then the Afghani government was like, okay, well, so obviously you need to die. and like basically threatened her life. But it was a mechanism through which she could have financial freedom in a system that basically said women are not allowed to transact without the permission of a man. And so they hear these stories, and so they're like, okay, I get it. I get how that's useful, but they have yet to grapple with how that's possible. And they have yet to grapple with the fact that there's also an ongoing kind of ESG narrative that is kind of conflicting with that. Like, oh, divest from things that enrich people that you don't like, but also having a financial freedom forum, like a financial freedom track with Bitcoin. If you divest from that because a bad person can use it, it means that you lose all the benefits of financial freedom for the little guy. So I think there's just a lot of people need to really change the way they think about all of this stuff. And it's going to take time. That's fine. It is what it is.
100%.
Yeah.
It sounds like permissionless sort of censorship resistance with number go up just means that nation states and institutions and stuff will have to bend to our will.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, pretty much. It's like, as I was saying, there's it's not a question of if people want this. It's a question of, you know, how are you going to deal with it? Because it's here, it exists. And I mean, you can make it onerous, or you can make it a bit of a pain in the ass to access it initially. But once people are in the Bitcoin ecosystem and utilizing it and kind of forming perhaps circular economies and actually transacting with it, like once you're in that ecosystem, you can't stop it from the outside. Like you're already there. You can just slow people from getting access to it is kind of my read on it. I don't know. Ben Gagnon, do you have any thoughts on, I mean, just Bitcoin in general as a tool for the little guy to use?
Yeah, you know, obviously that's a big part of what it's for. And I think it's interesting that we talk about in a totalitarian government, what's going to happen. You know, we had a situation here in Canada where we had a totalitarian government come and step down and say, hey, you can't do this, and freeze bank accounts because they're donating to protesters. And then, you know, when people started donating in Bitcoin, the day after, the Canadian government dusted off a 4-year-old piece of legislation that had been on the shelves in 2018 and threw it at our industry. And so they said, you know, anything that they could do to throw at Bitcoin, they're going to do it. And they proved their stripes, you know, during the Ontario trucker protest very clearly. You know, this is a pretty, you know, in the grand scheme of things, a trucker protest is a very inconsequential, you know, event for a major government in the world. And this is how they responded to it. How are they going to respond to something when it actually is threatening to the government? You know, they're going to come down even harder. And what we've seen in the last about year and a half, because we put together a coalition of basically every single Canadian Bitcoin miner, except for like one or two who are mostly focusing on the US now. We all came together. We engaged with government. We said, you know, look, you guys have no idea what you're doing. You've never consulted with us. You've never consulted with industry. Do you understand what the impacts of this are going to be? And they're just like, oh yeah, you know, we used to work for Google. We understand Bitcoin. We understand mining. We understand the tech. You know, and you have these conversations for weeks and months, and you know, you'll get into these hour-long sessions, and you know, 5 minutes before you're up, they say, actually, you know, do you have a photo of a Bitcoin mine? Because, you know, we haven't actually seen one before. And so, you know, this is the kind of level of sophistication that we're dealing with here with politicians and bureaucrats and the people who are fighting against us. You know, obviously they want to cramp down on it. I think it's really easy to be really comfortable in the West. But that, I think, has been changing over the last couple of years, especially with COVID. Really accelerated that move where people realize that, you know, hey, things are not, you know, as rosy as they once were. Things are not as comfortable as they once were. We need to start opening our eyes because, you know, this train is coming. But the more we push with government and the more we push with politicians and regulators and bureaucrats, the more we're very clear that they just have zero understanding of the underlying technology or the industry or what's actually happening. We have every good data point on our side. Like every single good data point on our side. When it comes to like the only thing that you can say against Bitcoin, I think there's two. And there's okay, criminals use it, which I think we all know is a pretty nonsensical argument. I mean, every single US dollar is covered in cocaine. You can't say that about every Bitcoin. What are criminals going to use to transfer, huge amounts of cash? They use the 500 euro dollar bill because it's the most concentrated form of physical cash that you can have. That's what they use. They don't use Bitcoin very often. Bitcoin is for very minor things. And then the second thing is on the ESG and the environmental. And it's very clear that they have zero understanding there. But people are really starting to get wise. I even had a podcast with Digiconomist like 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And that made me bullish because I've been wanting to debate Digiconomist for years. And I got him to admit that his model is broken. And, it's especially broken when the price is going up in a very, very rapid environment. And that's when people care, right? Nobody looks at, hey, what is the environmental impact when Bitcoin's down at 16K? Everybody's saying, hey, we're at an all-time high. What is Bitcoin's environmental impact now? How much energy are we consuming? And that's when these sort of things start breaking down. We got him to admit that. So that alone, getting Digiconomist to admit that his model breaks down in bullish environments, that makes me bullish right there, because that is behind every single piece of environmental FUD. Every single one of them cites Digiconomist. Everyone.
That's amazing. I was listening to that actually on the plane, and yeah, again to kind of hear the kind of just circular arguments, and he did. I don't know. I felt like you were very concise in your criticism of his model and pointing out all of the inaccuracies around various things. It's funny though, because I think I saw something on Twitter today of him doubling down on his per transaction everything. Like it's like it went in one ear and out the other. But I mean,
he's got one shtick, and he's got a very focused audience. This is all they want to care about. He's giving them exactly what they want to hear, right? But to get him to admit out of his own mouth that his model is faulty and it breaks down, especially when people most care about it, that's a major, major win for me. A major, major win, I think, for Bitcoin miners everywhere, because the energy thing is just nonsensical.
That's fantastic. I love that. Yeah, I mean, again, the ESG thing, it's an interesting, I mean, I think a lot of people don't think through, especially in regards to Bitcoin mining. They don't look at, they don't look at any of the data really. They just look at the quick sound bites from Digiconomist and don't even question how those conclusions will come to. But nonetheless, what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna round out. I just wanted to quickly touch on what I was excited about, Oslo and all that stuff. I'm gonna finish that up here. We'll cut that, and I'm gonna do a little rotation. I'm gonna actually toss it over to, let's start with Ben DeWall, and I'm gonna cue you up. Simple question: why are you bullish?
Absolutely. So, I think what's making me bullish recently is what I'm seeing with all of the kids getting into Bitcoin. So, you look at what was, you go to a conference a couple of years back, and occasionally there'd be some adult who'd brought their kids along, but their kids were basically just kind of playing, ignoring what's going on. Just this last maybe 6 months to a year, I'm seeing all of these kids actually talking about Bitcoin. So, at BTC Prague, there was the Generation Bitcoin guys, bunch of sort of late teens talking about, how do we get more Bitcoin into schools? How do we get more Bitcoin, into colleges, universities, that kind of thing. So there's that side of things. Then, the younger group. So, my daughter Sam was hanging out with Sam Prince and Sam Day. So we had like 3 Sams, which is a bit concerning for us Bitcoin Bens. It looks like there might be some Bitcoin Sams coming up in the next generation. But those 3 and a couple of others, they were helping to sell these NFC tags to people there, and taking payment in Bitcoin, writing the NFC tags for people. So understanding what's going on, and that's what's making me really bullish, is just seeing the next generation actually knowing what's happening, because again, I'm going to have to say my daughter said it best on stage. She got up there and she said, "Do you want the next generation to be Bitcoiners, or do you want them to not be Bitcoiners?" That's worth thinking about.
It's awesome to actually, those kids were killing it with so anybody that wasn't there, they basically had these little pins that you could buy, and you could encode your Nostr NPub to it. And so if then to add somebody, you just go up, you tap your phone, and it would auto open up whatever Nostr client you're running and go directly to their profile so you could follow them. And they were charging sats for them. And it was like the best product you could buy. Like it was, they must have raked in a ton of sats. I actually had one at home. I forgot to bring it. So yeah, anyways, what a great idea. What an awesome thing to put out there. And again, I'm super bullish on the next generation of Bitcoiners. All of them now, like any kid born after 2009 has never known a world where Bitcoin didn't exist, right? Like it's just been a fact of life. There's no hurdle to get over to be like, well, this is a different money from the money that I grew up with. No, it's been parallel the whole time. And furthermore, you've got one set of infrastructure that's failing and one set of infrastructure that's becoming more strong, easier to use, and is becoming more popular. They're basically seeing the growth of one form of money and the failure of another in their adolescence. That's bullish as hell. So I don't know. I'll open up to everybody else, but yeah, a great topic, Ben. I don't know if you want to add anything else before you pass it to everybody.
I'd just say, that whole thing about growing up with one form of money versus the other, something I've noticed, especially with my kids. So I've got two. I've got Sam and also her younger brother, and with them, one of the things I really love is when you teach an adult about Bitcoin, you have to help them unlearn the current process. You say, okay, in Bitcoin it works like this, unlike what you're used to. Don't think about banks and it's peer to peer. So you're teaching these things. With kids, you don't have to do that. You can just teach them how it works without having to try and break this understanding of how fiat works. And that's actually, I find, a really, really great way. And they learn it far easier than anyone learns how the fiat system works, because fiat's this giant complex mess.
100%. Well, other guys want to jump in here?
I'm glad to hear that, because one of the things that I notice every time I meet Bitcoiners or go to a conference is we are some of the most motivated, passionate, intelligent people around, and you don't see that anywhere else. Like you literally don't see the passion and intelligence and really the drive of people, the conviction of people in any other industry. You don't see it in accounting. You don't see it in legal. You don't see it in finance. You don't see it anywhere else, but you see it in Bitcoin. And so we're attracting some of the brightest minds, and hopefully we're attracting some of the the brightest kids too. And I really look forward to becoming a Bitcoin boomer. Let's bring on this new generation. Let's move me aside. Let them take over. It's very, very bullish.
Awesome. Any other gents want to dive in? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I've got a cousin, Kyle. He's the eldest and the wisest of us Schmitz, and he's bred a very smart kid, my nephew Cameron. And I was nipping at him a little bit about Bitcoin, and it's going to go to zero, because he's worried about his sneaker collection and all. He knows the price of everything. And then so I got him to clean my golf shoes, and he said, "Oh, you don't need to pay me." But I gave him $10 worth of Satoshis. And a week later, he was telling me about the money printer, And so to Dewal's comment there, they don't have to unlearn this. Like, we don't get taught about the fiat system. We just all of a sudden live it. And it's usually kind of something that you don't yet really understand or know what's going on, but we do know that we're on this hamster wheel, and you're wondering how you get off. And so, just to the comments of the kids, they don't have to learn this mess. They can go straight to the facts, follow the math, and they can understand Bitcoin. So I got him on ShakePay, so I hooked him up on ShakePay, and now when he goes to school, he gets all of his friends to give him money, and he goes and buys the lunch, and he collects the Satoshis. So
Nice. Kid's already running a racket. Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, it's very interesting that again, like the struggle of trying to get somebody to even recognize that the existing system is not the only way to do things, right? Like that's an initial struggle. Like they're like, well, no, this is how it works. This is how it has to be. There has to be 2% inflation. Otherwise the economy would implode. That's just how it works. It's how it's worked for, you know, my entire life. I don't care about before my lifetime. People don't realize that this is the experiment. So, Kiwi, what do you think?
Well, you know, without 2% inflation, no one would have chairs or roads. So there's that to consider. Sure. But I think it's very benign work that you gentlemen are doing for the kids. You know, Greg Foss would be happy.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, we've already got the next generation of Bitcoiners. To cap off bullish on Bitcoin kids, a lot of you guys are familiar with our good friend Steve Barber. He has been adjacent. He's been supportive, and those that know his son is named Ben. And if that doesn't make you bullish, I don't know what does. So hats off to Mr. Barber. He's got an honorary seat on the board until his son comes of age. So, you know, he gets to represent his son through adolescence with the High Council. So awesome. Now, wait, what does Yellow have a something to say here? Aren't you concerned by the fact that if 10 times the users are on board, a majority of them boomers using Bitcoin centralized and clean, by changing how the majority use it, they change Bitcoin itself? Thoughts? So like if most people are just using custodial Bitcoin, does that inherently change Bitcoin itself? I'm inclined to say that the economic reality of custodians and the nature of the ability to settle quickly and the fact that most Bitcoin has already been mined, and so like these institutions will be trying to like capture, you know, a non-majority of coins because a lot of them will just never end up at institutions. I think it doesn't inherently. I think, yeah, there's going to be risk to people using those systems because not your keys, not your coins. But yeah, I mean, in the interim, yeah, sure, there's going to be issues with stuff like that. There's going to be rehypothecation. There's going to be all of that. But I think that there's also going to be huge missteps. And at some point, a reckoning comes to any institution that dares to offer up IOUs that aren't one-to-one with Bitcoin. So I don't know. Thoughts, gentlemen?
I think that everyone first gets those touch points through convenience, right? A lot of people will be like, hey, use Wallet or Satoshi or what have you, some sort of centralized or custodial model. But that's just to entice them and meet them at their map of the world. It has to be relatively easy initially so that they can play with it and see the benefits of it. And then that takes them down their own little hero's journey of realizing that not your keys, not your coins. If it's on someone else's platform, then it's just an IOU that you don't really own it. So I don't see it as a big threat. It is entertaining though.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I'd second that. I mean, basically, I think there's different kinds of platforms that onboard people in different ways at the moment, and you know, some of them do a better job of pushing people towards self-custody than others. Especially a lot of these sort of gambling casino type exchanges with all of the shit coins and so on. It's just those don't onboard people to Bitcoin. They onboard people to gambling, with Bitcoin being one of the things that is being gambled with, but not really to Bitcoin itself. But something like Wallet of Satoshi, it's equally as custodial as a casino, but it's a very different kind of thing because it's letting people receive and spend Bitcoin directly, easily, and so on. So that's when people actually then start investigating and saying, oh, this isn't my Bitcoin. Okay, I need to actually figure out, how do I make it my Bitcoin? How do I actually get things off? Of course, and because it's a Lightning wallet, it'll interact nicely with an actual self-custody system. So I think there's nothing wrong with custodial systems inherently. It's more there's something wrong with the wrong types of custodial systems.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is still just the fiat brain applying their thought process to what Bitcoin is, and not being able to understand that on the network, like the ledger, the network itself, equalizes all participants. And so not being able to understand that there will, obviously there will be banking in the future, but you do not need to have a custodial, somebody in custodialship of your Bitcoin. So again, I'm not George Gammon, the rebel capitalist. He talks about the rehypothecation and how Bitcoiners don't understand that. I just don't think it's connecting to him that like the protocol level disregards this papered Bitcoin and if it's going to be a fork. And so it isn't Bitcoin, and a lot of people are going to just learn that lesson.
Bitcoin's a total free market. Like, different solutions apply to different people. The great thing is that it's all voluntary, right? And, well, one transaction may make sense for base chain. One transaction might make sense on Lightning Network. For other transactions, people will want to use custodians. And, I know with our company, we're publicly traded, we're audited by Big Four. The auditors want us to use a custodian. And now, that is maybe not, does have certain counterparty risk, of course, when you're using a custodian. But if you don't have that intermediary stepping stone, there's no way for larger institutions to adopt it. Like if it wasn't for custodians, MicroStrategy wouldn't be allowed to buy Bitcoin, right? And so, we have to understand that it's not like just because there are custodians out there that, manage Bitcoin doesn't mean that you have to put your Bitcoin with them, right? It's just an option for some people for them to use it. And, it is going to bring greater adoption. Like it already has.
Sorry, mute button. Anyways, I was also going to say too, sure, there's a short-term or mid-term kind of risk of lots of people, piling into like a BlackRock ETF and, a bunch of Bitcoin is stored there. But like the Bitcoin, the true Bitcoin user, person that is self-custodying, that, Yellowhead commented, like, Bitcoin price goes up from that, but at what cost? True. But at the same time, the individuals that actually decide that Bitcoin is better money and say, I'd like to earn Bitcoin, and I'd like to, or the merchants that say, I don't want to accept anything other than Bitcoin because I recognize that my money is trash and it's being devalued. Those people aren't really affected necessarily by the ETF because they're receiving Bitcoin directly, or you're living on Bitcoin, or you've forged relationships where you're transacting in Bitcoin. And the people that are utilizing the ETF and say, well, what if I want to use this? And they realize like it's a black hole. Well, they're going to step out and start transacting in the Bitcoin economy, not the IOU economy, I suppose. So it'll probably take some time to recognize that. But I mean, many people, there's a good base of people that do get that and that will be able to communicate that well, and the rest will come to economic reality in due time. I don't think that these ETFs and stuff will go away until it's kind of clear that the money is broken, and that's a common narrative. But and they'll probably still exist for some time after that. But I think that you just get people utilizing Bitcoin in different ways. You get people that are using like an investment vehicle, and then you get people that actually go on a Bitcoin standard. And, it's in terms of freedom to go up, it doesn't affect me if somebody wants to play fiat games with investment vehicles.
Another way to look at it is, if BlackRock and, they've got their ETF, or in the fine print, they can say they can give you any forked version or something. It's going to leave a trail of bodies wrecked, but Bitcoin is anti-fragile, or to only highlight the benefit of not your keys, not your coins further. And at the same time, while they're issuing paper IOUs to all the institutions, all the plebs that have already front run them for years will continue to buy up that Bitcoin and actually self-custody it. So plebs over institutions, everything as usual.
Agreed. Agreed. All right, we're gonna do a rotation. Ben, I don't know if when you were talking about shit, Gagnon, I don't know if when you were talking about when you went on a little rant earlier, if you were kind of diving into like the digiconomist stuff, if you were already diving into your reason or not, or did you have another thing that you wanted to touch on?
I mean, I think it's just very bullish for the mining space. It's pretty interesting time, you know, when we're so close to halving that actually things are trending up quite well. You know, we've got hash rate has grown 48% this year. It only went up about 46% last year. So we've already seen in 6 months more growth than we saw in the previous 12 months. And, you know, hash price in terms of revenue per terahash is still up 25% this year. So even though the network has grown 50%, mining economics are better. Hardware prices are still incredibly low. Miners are starting to actually organize and put their arguments forward. We're starting to gather better data, and we're actually countering a lot of the negative press and a lot of the negative opinions about us. And Digiconomist is part of this. So, you know, when you look at what is the space for Bitcoin security and the market, I mean, things are really bullish right now. We've got good prices. We've got the actual the ordinals thing, which proved that there couldn't be a separate, you know, price discovery layer in terms of transaction fees that will give miners even better security and more incentive to further secure the network. There are so many good things happening in the mining space right now, but mining's kind of generally seen as, I think, a little bit boring. And so people don't really pay too much attention to it unless you are, you know, full into the weeds like I am. But this is the key that drives everything. Like, if we're not hashing, we don't have Bitcoin. And, you know, unless the incentives are there for us to continue to secure the network, you know, that does jeopardize the future. And right now the incentives are incredible. So people are growing incredibly fast. Hash rate continues to decentralize. And we're starting to see a lot of traction take place, especially in the United States, especially conservative states, where they say, you know, we're pro-business, we're pro-development, we're pro-jobs. We understand how this integrates with the electric grid and how this actually provides benefit to the electric grid, all of the electrical consumers on that grid. It creates rural job growth. It creates all these different benefits to these communities. This isn't a negative. This is all around a positive. And, you know, we even are starting to get even Dems now who are starting to understand that, hey, Bitcoin is not the enemy here. Bitcoin actually provides a lot of the goals and the tools, you know, that we're looking for, right? If your thing is emissions, and Bitcoin is actually really good for you, because this is the only economic incentive in the world to reduce your energy waste and reduce your emissions without a government subsidy. It's the only one. And, you know, getting rid of that economic incentive to reduce your waste is not going to reduce waste. You know, it's going to increase waste. And Dems are starting to understand that. And so it's appealing to them. It's appealing to Republicans and conservatives because of the rural jobs, because of the greater amount of utility growth, because of the greater profitability. Like, people are starting to understand now, I think because of what Bitcoin miners have been pushing so hard on, is that Bitcoin is not the divisive issue that everyone thinks it is. It is the unifying issue. It is the only unifying issue out there. Like, you can't look at any other issue out there and be like, oh yeah, well, yeah, I can see how these two people will get along. It's like, no, Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin, we are the unifying political issue. It makes me incredibly bullish in terms of what we're going to see both in Western countries, policies, and also just in terms of the industry and security of the network. I mean, so much investment is pouring into Bitcoin mining right now.
I've got a question for you in and around decentralization of mining. So obviously the China mining ban had a big impact on that, because there was a ton of hash in China, which then, you know, kind of filtered out into other jurisdictions. I think at last count, well, last thing I heard of, around 20% of hash is perhaps maybe still within Chinese borders. But we've seen obviously a huge ramp up in hash within the United States. Do you think that there's a possibility that at some point in the future, the United States captures a similar amount of hash rate to what China previously held? Or do you think that ship has sailed and it's going to kind of more filter out to other parts of the globe and become more decentralized than it is now?
I don't think anybody will ever have a market share like China had in the past. I mean, that was an incredible market share. Depending on who you ask or what metrics you're looking at, it's like 60 to 80% of the market was within mainland China. And it makes a lot of sense. Like I grew up in China. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I built mines in Taiwan and mainland China. I've operated there. I speak Chinese. Like I understand that aspect of it. You know, when China banned Bitcoin mining, they didn't really do it to ban Bitcoin mining. They did it because people were using Bitcoin mining to circumvent capital controls, right? And this is something that people don't understand. Like, oh, it's about the ESG. No, China really doesn't care. China is the number one producer of, or the number one builder of basically every energy source, you know, and that's coal, that's nat gas, that's nuclear, that's wind, that's solar. Like it doesn't not matter what your energy source is. China's the largest builder of new electrical generating stations. They're also the largest operator of currently operating electrical generating stations, and they're the largest consumer of electricity, like by far. Nobody else even holds a candle to that. So thinking about like, you know, what's going on there in mainland China, like this was all about capital controls. And now you start seeing in Hong Kong, we now have positive developments for crypto investment. And this is something that's been a long time coming for Hong Kong. Hong Kong is the gateway for Chinese money. And now that that is opening up in Hong Kong, I think what we're going to start to see is that that is going to represent like an actual legal proxy for Chinese to start investing in Bitcoin again. It's not going to be mining in China like the same way it was. That's a completely different business now. But you're going to start seeing investor dollars coming back, and they're going to start flowing into Bitcoin. And I, you know, in terms of what they're doing with like the hydro miners, like the hydro miners are, I think, largely what's enabling a lot of the Bitcoin mining in China, because now it's not being classified as Bitcoin mining, it's being classified as heat generation. That's something that I think is going to have a lot of impacts both in the US, Canada, everywhere else. If you can electrify your heat and you can recycle these inputs, like this is an all around win. And I think that's the vast majority of what's going on in China. There's definitely some people who are operating under the table, but there are very large scale heat projects going on with MicroBT and Bitmain, residential projects, hotel projects, office buildings, because this is the legal way to do it. I don't think we'll ever see another country dominate like China did in the past. And I think that's very positive as well. You now see like UAE's investing. Russia has major investments in Bitcoin mining. Canada is huge center still. United States has grown a lot of traction. Paraguay and South America is really starting to open up to people. You even have, you know, smaller countries like El Salvador developing it. I think, you know, the more Bitcoin gets spread out across these countries, I think the better it is for the security of the network. I think it also, the better it is for the security of the world, you know, that all of this hash rate is actually spread around and not one country has too much of an overt influence over the others. So I think this is incredibly positive.
Any comments, questions from the other Bens? We've got everybody awestruck. I did have one other question I was going to ask in and around mining. Does it become completely, and I guess this might take us down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but in terms of home mining, is that a reality in the future? What does it look like? How might people interact with Bitcoin and mining if they can't mine from home? Like what does that kind of ecosystem look like? Does it exist?
Oh, it absolutely exists. I don't think home mining ever goes away. I mean, where people get wrong about Bitcoin mining is they think that like, hey, I've got electricity, I'll just plug it in here. It's like, no, that's not really what goes into a mining operation. You need to be very, very selective in terms of your electricity and your inputs. And really, if you look at, like, let's say a normal distribution curve of electricity, you don't want to be mining here in the dead center. You want to be mining here on these like tail ends where you're monetizing some level of inefficiency. And on the low end where the power is really cheap, obviously that makes a direct sense. But even on the high end where the electricity is really expensive, that's what incentivizes people to say, hey, why don't I use Bitcoin mining to generate my heat now? Like, why don't I use a Bitcoin miner to heat my hot tub? Because I'm paying 16 cents, for the electricity. Even if it's not profitable, at least I'm getting something back, right? And you can plug in an S9 and you can generate that heat. It's not profitable, but it's cheaper than just generating the heat already, right? So this is a way that's not going to go away. And I think, especially, with like things like S9s and the different kind of firmware, if you're just using it for heating purposes, like, you can buy an S9 as a heater for less than you can buy an actual heater, and it generates a revenue and it gives you KYC sats. And like, why would you not do that? I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. I don't think it goes away, but you're not going to see home miners competing with like a Bitfarms, in terms of scale or cost. But you are going to see Bitcoin mining being used to monetize these kind of tail ends of people's economic scenarios, where they're trying to recycle their energy inputs. They're trying to leverage what they already have to get a greater return or a greater yield. And the Bitcoin going into heat thing is huge. Like, we just had that thing that blew up on Twitter and TikTok the other day of that spa in New York who was using Bitcoin mining to heat this spa in New York, and people are freaking out about it. But do they have a better solution? Is their solution to just power the spa with the hot air that they spew on Twitter? I mean, Bitcoin mining is a far better solution than anything else that they have. And we're really starting to see that roll out. People are going to do really, really cool and interesting things with it. And I think the Bitcoin kids are going to figure out even more creative ways to integrate Bitcoin mining into their homes and into their lives.
Yeah, I can attest to the home heater. I have a wife-approved space heater in our living room now, built from an S9. And I just got, like, I think all in, buying an S9 and getting the fans to swap out so that they're quieter, and then like a nice 3D printed case. I think it was maybe like $250 or something. Put it all together, plug it in. I get probably, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not running it in the summer. I don't need to. But as soon as it gets cold again, I'll just plug that in, not have to use a space heater that I would normally be using. And it pays me back a little bit each month. I don't know, 10, 20 bucks, something like that. It kind of varies, but yeah. I mean,
are you solo mining on that?
No, I'm not. Maybe
a few lucky solo miners over the last 2 years. There's been like 3 or 4 lucky solo miners who found blocks on hash rate. They should have never found it. And maybe that's, I don't know. I've got a couple of conspiracy theories on that, but hey, I'd rather plug in an S9 and solo mine than buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. It's just like a forever lottery ticket, right? You just plug it in. You're already paying for the heat anyways, and you might hit the jackpot.
Exactly.
Why not? Why not? Your space heater might end up paying you a few $100,000 or something. Yeah, I think it's great. Have any of you got, other Bens tried any? I mean, the S9 heater for me was like my first foray into mining. I do have an M30 Plus and a black box outside. I got to get my breaker kind of done to be able to handle that, and I probably will use it to heat a garage or maybe extend the seasons in like a greenhouse or something. We'll see. Batting around ideas. Anyways, my wife's super interested in it. Have any of the other Bens at all dabbled in mining, or are you kind of not yet?
CPU mined in 2010, but that's a bit different. No, with current mining, no, I've been actually looking into next year. We're planning on moving house, and when we do, I'd really like to actually set up a proper water heating system, so get all of the water heating for the house done with mining. That's kind of the plan, but it obviously depends on where we move and how much control I've got over that sort of thing. But that's the plan.
And you can shower in sats.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the best.
Chestover here saying the only thing hotter than a miner exhaust is Ben Gagnon's takes. Amazing. And then Yellow was saying there's a rumor a while back about Tesla incorporating a miner in their wall batteries to balance out electricity usage and battery health and their solar roof. We got to see usage like that. Are we going to see usage like that in the future? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I'm pretty bearish on Doge mining, so probably not.
Doge, yes.
I did the same as you, Ben. I had a S9 and then an M30S, heating the garage and stuff. I did one of the DIY black boxes, which was cool.
Nice.
So,
That takes skill. I'm not much of a carpenter myself to build my own black box. I only deal with imaginary, intangible things. Not so good with the,
I first did it in a cabinet file where I cut out holes and had the miners blowing air out the holes, and so you could open it up and check on them if need be, and all the ventilation in the back. But again, a lot of effort to just heat the garage.
Yeah. No, that's cool though. My wife saw the miner heated hot tub in Miami, and she's like, "Can we do that?" So that might be in my future. There's a couple guys local that have been doing a lot of immersion mining. So
need the orange spas.
Yes, exactly. So we'll see. I'm gonna see how that goes. But anyways, let's go for another rotation. I'm going to actually Kiwi. I'm going to keep it with you. I'll just cue you up. Simple question: why are you bullish?
Super bullish on the Bitcoin bends, building Bitcoin better. I think it's a very benevolent group, and the gentrification of the Bitcoin sector has really benefited from it. So super bullish about that.
You came prepared. You came with the receipts, man. There are a lot of good Bitcoin. Let's rattle off some of the bends and whether there's Ben Price was on Simply Bitcoin earlier today. He's talking about the Bitcoin company. Have you guys used that? Yeah. They're basically like you can get gift cards, Visa cards, all kinds of stuff with Bitcoin. You can also get sats back and rewards on a tons of stuff. Like if you're using Voltage or something to host a node, I think you can get like 21% off. There's all these like pretty awesome deals and sats back deals that you can do. So he's been killing it, and he started that with Ben the Carmen, but I think Ben the Carmen is now primarily focused on Mutiny Wallet, which is another cool project like on-chain and Lightning. And I think I got into I don't know if it's available to the general public yet, but low key, I got into the closed beta because I was Ben. He gave the AOK in the background. I was actually talking with somebody in Oslo, and they were related, and they were like had Mutiny. I was like, oh, I want to get in there, and she sent a quick message, and then she said Ben the Carmen was in the room, and he said he's a Ben, he's in. So I got approved for the closed beta. So. But yeah, it's pretty nice looking project. Well, I'm trying to think.
We've also got like Ben Ark, who did the Bitcoin POS. We've got Ben DeWall from Swan, Ben Gagnon with the mining stuff, Bueno here, me from Amber App, you doing all the tutorials, and to speak of the gentrification further, like even Simply Bitcoin trying to get the whole tip going and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the first step to Nico just legally changing his name. I think
we got to be careful of that though, because we also did see Joe Rogers try change his name to Ben Rogers, and he is part of that Benumus party with Skeef and Tucson. So just be warned, be careful.
Yeah, we got to be careful about letting rogue bends into. What about there's definitely some out of consensus bends that maybe don't have
McKenzie.
Yeah,
that guy's got to go.
That Ben McKenzie is clearly like, if the OC didn't do it, clearly his take on Bitcoin is already. I don't know. I don't even consider him a ban at this point. I don't know about you
No,
guys.
neither's BitBoy and his Bencoin. Those are forked versions. They have nothing to do with us.
Yeah, the world reserve currency of Ben's everywhere is the SAT. And any deviation from that is outside of consensus rules. So I think that's how we got to attack.
Are we sats or are we bits? Is it bits or sats?
Ooh.
Sats.
Are we going to cause a civil war here? Is this where it happens, where the Bens fork from each other? I don't know. I'm a Sats maximalist. Every time I see bits, I think it's not going to happen. I don't think. I feel like Sats is the denomination of the people, and I also, the reason I lean towards Sats is because we already saw, because there used to be millibits, and millibits was used as a mechanism because people were like, well, one Bitcoin is starting to be too large of a denomination. And okay, fair. Like nobody deals in the decimals really anymore. But then millibits, like eventually a millibit is too large of a piece of a Bitcoin. It doesn't make sense as a denomination. So you keep on moving. Like how many times are you going to move people down the decimal places, say this is the new one that we use, instead of just going with Sats? Like Sats now, I remember being in Indonesia and I remember one Sat was one of their Indonesian rupiah. And so it was already par there. So one Sat already made sense there. And that was in 2016. And so like when you have par with a Sat in another country, then I think that, already you have currencies that have been devalued so much that Sats just kind of makes sense because they're already dealing in large numbers with the numbers of currency units they're using. So, I think we just commit to the lowest denomination. And then anything sub-Sat we can deal with if we need be. But, Sat cent parity, that's a ways out. Sat dollar parity will be a great moment. And then when we need decimals for Sats, I mean, we've already made it. So, yeah. But I'm interested to hear to the contrary.
I'm a bit maybe even confused when you say a decimal on a Sat, because I remember speaking to Newt about this, and he was telling me how we'll be able to split Sats. Is that what you're referring to right now?
You can technically have a fraction of a Sat on the Lightning Network. You just have to settle the channel. You just have to settle the channel in whole Sats. So like a Lightning channel can denominate. You can have, what is it, millisats that they use? Yeah. MSats. So yeah, you can have a fraction of a Sat sent via the Lightning Network for sure.
So I guess millisat, what is the division on that? Like we have 8 decimal places. Is there already a predefined, or I guess I'm still
yeah, at the moment it's just millisats, so it's literally 1/1000th of a Sat. That's the smallest amount on Lightning according to the current specifications. But there's technically nothing stopping you breaking it down smaller. And on whatever second layers anyone wants to build in the future, you can always break it smaller, as long as when it gets settled on chain, it has some mechanism for rounding to the nearest Sat or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, like it's, I mean, just like Bitcoin, again, like you get into I'm sure when we need to start using decimals on Sats, there will be tons of FUD around it. Like, oh, it's not as finite and scarce as they said. It'll be the whole, what's her name? Francis Coppola argument, the infinite pizza argument. You can just cut slices forever and solve world hunger. Yeah, we'll see some of that, but such is life. But yeah, basically on chain, it always, like, the Sat is the lowest denomination, but off chain, you could technically lay claim to part of a Sat, as long as later on when it settles on chain, there's a mechanism where, yeah, you're rounding to the nearest Sat or whatever.
Yeah, actually, not without going too much of a rabbit hole here, but it's kind of funny. People talk about MSats at the moment, so millisats, as being somehow less secure because you can't necessarily promise them with the on-chain settlement. A, who cares about less than a Sat right now anyway? But B, that's actually true of much larger amounts as well. Basically, anything larger than the dust amount, or anything smaller than the dust amount, I should say, you're not going to be able to necessarily settle that on chain anyway. When you close out your channel, you're paying more in the fees to close the channel than that amount that was sent. So you actually have a much higher low limit of trust in a single Lightning channel anyway. So whether we're talking MSATs or whatever, the on-chain settlements actually count for that.
I think of that as like my my Fold app, where I've spent the last 2 years hitting religiously the free lottery wheel without ever spending any money on the Fold app, and I'm now just shy of 1,000 sats away from being able to withdraw. It's taken me 2 years, but I mean that's basically the same thing. Just gonna take longer to close.
I love it. Awesome. All right. Any final thoughts on anything anything Ben related in the bentrification of Bitcoin before we round out?
Well, you met another Ben Harper at the conference, and what was he, Luxor, I think.
Yeah.
And he didn't tout it or anything, but I believe that is the son of a former prime minister of ours, if I'm not mistaken. So, having that, so I don't know his backstory or anything like that, but, 1 degree of separation away from someone that's ran the country. It's pretty interesting.
That's great. And he's in the High Council of Bitcoin Bans. He's actually been a huge part of the Canadian lobby against the tax legislation. He's been a huge part of that because he understands how the processes work. He's probably the single most important person for fighting the Canadian tax lobby.
How poetic would it be if, I don't know if Stephen Harper, our former prime minister, actually stacks sats himself and holds some Bitcoin, but how poetic would it be to have Trudeau, who shut down people's bank accounts, be bookended by Bitcoiners running the country? Like before and after Bitcoiners running the country, that would be kind of hilarious. But I guess we shall see. I'd say there's about a coin toss's chance that our next prime minister in Canada is a Bitcoiner. I mean, again, I would say caveat, never trust a politician, but given the choice, I would also say I would prefer the guy that seems to get Bitcoin and has like Jeff Booth and Greg Foss in his ear to the dude who just shut down everybody's bank accounts. So, take your pick. But again, if Trudeau were to get in again, I would just view it as, all right, well, I guess this just accelerates Bitcoin adoption because people realize how screwed the system is. So we'll see.
The sovereign individual thesis playing out.
Yes. I think so. Awesome.
Do you have a list over there, Kiwi, of just Ben words that you're trying to crank through on this call? Because you've got some good ones over there.
Yeah, just coming off the top of the dome.
This is impressive. I don't know. I feel like you need to provide a list to the panel next time so that we know we all can replace words on the regular. So
I'll
many.
give my best.
Yeah.
You need to be a benefactor of good words.
It would be beneficial for all of us.
Amazing. All right, let's do one more rotation. Schmidt, I'm tossing it to you, and I'm just going to cue you up. Why are you bullish, man?
Well, again, I'm still relatively new into this space, so kind of one of the catalysts for me to understand Bitcoin was the trucker convoy, and so this whole idea of censorship resistance, and so that kind of was one of the reasons I went down the rabbit hole of learning about Bitcoin. And so I guess tying that to the idea of self-custody, and I'm trying to wrap my head around what other asset do we have that truly has self-custody that is not handcuffed by the network itself, the regulators, So like I'm a real estate guy, obviously I'm subject to property tax, and if they don't like what I'm doing, that property's not my property anymore. So gold, again, self-custody, but you're kind of subject to that network. We now have the ability to self-custody this digital asset and become a sovereign individual. That's kind of in a roundabout way. One of the main things that was so difficult was realizing what it meant to be a citizen of a country. You're subject to the rules. So Bitcoin is self-custody, Bitcoin is self-reliance, and becoming a global citizen. So I'm still new, but that idea has me bullish.
It definitely I mean, it's been eye-opening in Canada, but I mean the world at large kind of saw, you know, depending on what their local news showed, kind of saw Bitcoin. And I've had many people come to me and say, yeah, that was kind of my touch point that made me dig a little deeper, because there was always this assumption that, like, oh, I'm in a first world country, you know, nothing like that would ever happen, where they go and they just blanket shut down bank accounts and do different things. And again, whether you were a fan of the protest or not is irrelevant. There have been people that have been able to zoom out, even if they disagreed with the protest, and say, oh, wow, if this can happen to a protest I don't like with a government I do like, the inverse is true. And they realize, like, this is actually all this top-down control. It means that me as an individual, my ability to be sovereign and control my money is quite fragile, and can change quite quickly if I fall out of line with whoever happens to be ruling the country at the time. This is pretty true just about everywhere now. That is the precedent that has been set. So yeah, it's a pretty unique situation to have people coming to Bitcoin because of this large kind of globally visible movement that was the largest protest in Canadian history. So I don't know, like, I'm curious, maybe Kiwi, like, what did you see of what was happening here, like outside of, you know, the Twitter sphere and stuff like that? Were you getting much in local news? Was it being shown much, or was it pretty quiet? Because you guys had a lot of restrictions down there for a good period of time as well.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because Canada was just like further along than New Zealand was, but they were implementing the same sort of stuff. And so it was just funny to get people to like draw their line in the sand, knowing that this is where it was going. And so for us, we saw a lot of that truckers stuff, but that was in the sort of like freedom movements and stuff like that online. But yeah, it was so funny because it'd be like, no, we're not going to do segregation. No, we're not going to do vaccine passports. That's conspiracy theories. You know, this shot is 100% effective. Okay, it's 95% effective. Okay, it's 70. Okay, you need one extra one. Okay, you need 2 extra ones. Okay, it's an annual thing. And we're segregating and doing vaccine passports. So like, we saw the writing on the wall. So hats off to the truckers and stuff for standing up and showing ways that we can overcome that. We didn't get much local sort of news about the Canadian truckers that I was aware of, but that's also because 2020, I saw that writing on the wall and got out of New Zealand. So I wouldn't be the best one to answer that question. Sorry, brother.
Fair enough. I was just curious about what was seen elsewhere. Ben, were you even in the country last year? I don't.
Me?
What's
yes. Sorry. Right.
I left Canada when May 30th, 2021, the exact date. I left Canada. And I haven't lived in Canada since. I've been back since, but I haven't lived there since. I fled off to the United States, and now I fled off to Costa Rica. But, you know, we, similarly to what happened with Canada and the trucker protest, we also saw that on the geopolitical stage here with Russia and sanctions, right? And, you know, you've got the situation where Russians trusted that their money was safe in these foreign countries. They trusted their assets were safe in these foreign countries, and they found out that they weren't, you know? And so all of a sudden they say, well, why do I have any money in USD or anything like that if it can just be taken away from me at any point? And so actually, you know, it's not something that you hear about because Russia's become like a black box ever since Ukraine happened. But Russia is one of the largest destinations for Bitcoin mining equipment. They are an energy nation. They have huge surpluses of energy. And if you're going to put sanctions on them, taking away their assets, and you're going to try and limit their ability to sell their energy abroad, guess what? They're going to plug in Bitcoin miners and they're going to sell that electricity online. And that's something that we've seen. And so the more that governments clamp down, the more that Bitcoiners are just going to just circumvent and work around. And, you know, the beautiful thing about government bureaucrats is that they're just incompetent. You know, never underestimate the incompetence of a government bureaucrat. And they'll never, ever be able to keep up with the pace that Bitcoin and Bitcoiners are moving at. And so that also makes me incredibly bullish because there's just no way to stop us.
I love it. Yeah, the geopolitical stuff in and around. I mean, you've seen now different countries come out of the woodwork and say, let's de-dollarize, let's get away from the dollar in response to the freezing of Russia's reserves, right? Like you have, I think it was Indonesia was one of them, and I mean, they're probably at very little risk to have stuff frozen, but they're still looking and saying, ooh, you know, if we get on the wrong side of the US, there's no guarantee that we have access to reserves. And I mean, I think that's a legitimate concern. Like they changed the game when they said, like, they didn't even freeze stuff. They didn't freeze Russian assets during the Cold War.
No.
Like
these attacks are undermining their own authority and their competence, right? Like Trudeau undermined his own authority, and now the U.S. government is undermining their own authority. And the only thing that's going to do is it's going to weaken the U.S. dollar. And relatively speaking, that is the tide that brings Bitcoin up. The weaker the U.S. dollar gets, the stronger Bitcoin becomes. It's a perfect inverse relationship.
Yeah. 100%.
It's been super interesting to like see Russia get cut off from that, and then, you know, all of the BRICS sort of stuff because of that subsequently. But then it's like you're just going to the same issue of having to trust like a collective of countries to act in good interest, which is worse than trusting one. And then also like building these gold reserves. And I don't know if you guys saw it, but there was I think like $1 billion worth of gold came from Perth, Australia. And it was just gold-plated tungsten that they sold to China. And so it's like, not only does gold not solve this, but neither does BRICS. And so they'll inevitably come to the same conclusion and just get the price they deserve, which is awesome.
Yeah. Go ahead, Schmidt.
Genya, I was just curious because I was listening to Greg Foss earlier today, and he was talking about Russia and how, you know, potentially oil, et cetera, will be priced in Bitcoin. How far off do you see something like that, energy being priced in Satoshis?
I don't think we're that far off, to be honest with you. You know, Russia has already approved the trade of international commodities being settled in Bitcoin. I don't know. I haven't followed it closely enough to know how those transactions have actually happened or whether or not they've actually happened. But I don't think that's far off. And when you look at, especially Bitcoin mining and you know, what drives our profit, like it's lower cost energy. You know, everybody seems to focus on higher efficiency machines. I'm sorry, a higher efficiency does not undo high electricity prices. It just doesn't. If you want to be a low cost competitor, you have to have low cost energy. You can't just have high efficiency machines. And the inevitable path for Bitcoin is to go to marginal source electricity. It's those units of energy that have zero demand, zero otherwise use, and, you know, zero cost for generation, right? To generate one extra unit of energy, it doesn't cost you any more, right? The plant's already built there, the financing's already in place. Like, to generate one extra kilowatt hour at a hydro dam doesn't cost you a cent, right? So that's where everything's going to go. And if things start priced in, it makes sense that you say, hey, how do you actually value this marginal cost electricity when you're applying it in Bitcoin mining? You know, you're going to start measuring in terms of the value that you're getting out of the Bitcoin network. And then if that happens, then you're going to have to start saying, well, you know, what's the relative cost if I sell to the Bitcoin network versus if I sell to, you know, the grid or other consumers? Like, it's going to get harder and harder to balance the FX volatility risk between the two different currencies. And I think there's going to be an incentive to just move everything over to Bitcoin over the long term. And it is like, energy makes perfect sense to be priced in sats, especially that energy that is underutilized, overlooked, wasted, you know, that marginal cost electricity, those marginal units of electricity, those should absolutely be priced in sats.
If you were going to put a specific date on the Petrosat, what time frame would you give it?
Specific date on the Petrosat?
Perhaps an hour. Let us know when that
maybe a block height.
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably somewhere in the 2030s. I think we're going to start seeing decent amounts of commodities being traded in Bitcoin probably sometime in the 2030s. I don't think we'll see it this decade. You'll probably see small pilot programs or small transactions, but I don't think it's going to be a very active market for another decade plus.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, the real question is, when do I start pricing my services in sats? I don't know the answer to that question yet. It may require some repricing over time as people cannot afford things, but that's okay. All right, gentlemen, I want to start. Sorry, go ahead.
I was actually just going to say, pricing things in sets, I actually already do. So you know, aside from whatever main job I'm currently doing, I run a small consultancy, and I've been writing invoices in sets for, you know, like 4 or 5 years now.
Ooh,
yeah.
So basically, if you have a set price in sats, is there like a threshold where you're like, maybe I gotta adjust prices and stuff like how do you handle it?
At some point, yeah, but I let it go for a while. So, you know, my one invoice could be worth, you know, 3 times as much before I'll think about actually, you know, dropping my prices.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Maybe I think I might have to consider pricing in sats for the next little bit here. All right, gentlemen, I want to start rounding out a bit here. What I like to do at the end of every episode is I like to do a quick round of any final thoughts you may have, anything that you forgot to get off your chest that you want to let people know about, that they could benefit from, whatever that may be. And then also, if you have any recommendations, and what I mean by recommendations, it could be really anything, like a book, a podcast, a video you saw, an article, an app, a device, you know, really anything, or just a life experience that you think could help people out. So I guess I'll start off. Final thoughts. I mean, it's been a long time coming to have the bends in one place. And I hope that, again, it was beneficial for all. And yeah, it's been a good time. So I will say you're all welcome back anytime. I hope to have another council meeting too. I hope the other Bens are proud of everything that we've accomplished here. And we'll have another round of this soon. I'd really like to just have like a free-for-all where it's just like a full screen of Bens and we just kind of shoot the shit. I think I can get 10 in here at the same time. I think we should try for that at some point.
I think we should go for 9. Have a hard cap at 9, so it's benign.
There we go.
God, you are on fire.
How do you do this? I think we need to appoint you to, like, I don't know what leg of government that would be, but it would be you know, like overseer of Ben puns or something like that, like in the office of puns. I don't know. You need to be some sort of a officiant. We'll find out. You know, let us know what he should be.
Sounds like another good use of taxpayer funds, doesn't it?
I think so. Yeah, we'll raise funds. We'll extract funds from all the bands. Wait, what have we done? Anyways, yeah. Okay, perfect. So In terms of recommendations, I was actually chatting to somebody earlier on today, and he was asking me some questions around, like, what do you say to people who think that we need, basically a lot of misconceptions about economics and oh, we need inflation in order to have the economy function and all these different things. And I said, give this book a read as kind of like a starter, a primer, and then you can kind of fall down some other rabbit holes, but it'll give you like kind of an overarching view of a better way to think about the economy. So Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. It's a short read. It's basically the same concept reiterated in different ways throughout the chapters. And it just kind of gives you like an overview of framing how you think of economics. And yeah, it was a good one. So anyways, I recommend that. Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. Yeah, that's it. So I'll rotate over. Maybe I'll toss to Dewal. Final thoughts, recommendations?
So yeah, this has been a awesome stream. It's so fun having so many Bens on. Every time you just say, "Hey Ben," and then everyone's like staring with one. Yeah, it's been good. Two small things. One, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out in Prague, my daughter announced that July this year is Bitcoin Kids Month. Every single podcaster, makerspace, meetup, company who can possibly think of doing something with kids, do it in July. Podcasters, that includes you, Ben, get kids on, figure out who you can get on, talk to them, maybe even get a kid as a co-host if you can. So that's, call to action there, get kids involved, make things happen. As for a recommendation, I've been reading a lot of books recently and just finished this one, which is the heftiest read I've had in a while. Bitcoin, a Game Theoretic Analysis. It's got graduate written there, and that's no joke. This is basically, just full of, actual math. So it's, yeah. But if you're into heavy math, this is actually a really, really good book.
Interesting. I hadn't heard of that one. That's all right then. Add it to the list, I suppose. Awesome. All right, let's toss it over to Gagnon. Final thoughts, recommendations.
Yeah, final thoughts. I think we're in a very, very, very strong position here rolling forward. I think we've passed a lot of the FUD and the malinvestment. I don't think we fully wiped out all of the malinvestment, but I think we wiped out a good chunk of it. And I'm incredibly bullish for that. In terms of recommendations, I always recommend Atlas Shrugged, which are the Bitcoin books before Bitcoin. So, Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead by Ayn Rand are always good books. And I know there's still plenty of Bitcoiners out there who have not read them. So go out there, read those books. They're like Bibles for Bitcoiners. And then I also recommend the BitMEX research blog. Like the BitMEX research blog is probably, I think, the most accurate blog out there. It's very overlooked, but especially Arthur Hayes' pieces, that guy is spot on almost every time. And definitely worth paying attention to that research blog. They don't put out stuff every day, but read what they put out because it's worth your time. And with that, I'm going to jump. I've got another call here. I'm running a couple minutes late too, but it's been great being with all of you, Vince. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Bye.
Appreciate your time. All right, let's toss it down to Kiwi. Final thoughts, recommendations.
Yeah, final thoughts is the fiat Bens are dying. Long live the Bitcoin Bens. Super bullish on Bens, and I would recommend two things. The first one being the Bible. Many haven't read that. You should probably read it. The second one being Seed Signers. They're awesome. Use them. BTC Sessions has some amazing tutorials with them. I'm building one and teaching a person how to use it a month. So if you want to get into it, you want a free seed signer and get shown the ropes, hit us up.
That's awesome. Seed Signer's badass, I gotta say. Really interesting what they built there, and it gives you a unique view into almost like what Bitcoin is, and it kind of changes the way that you think about interacting with Bitcoin and what hardware is and can be. So yeah, pretty unique there. Awesome. toss it to Schmidt. You can lead us out here. Final thoughts, recommendations, man.
This book made its rounds about a year and a half ago, or again, I guess, yeah, The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. That was a really, really eye-opening book for me. Kind of explains how we got here in a nutshell. The past, 500-700 years, kind of starting with Denmark to Britain to the US, and obviously China is kind of his call. But I think what he misses is the technological revolution that Bitcoin is. But it was definitely very eye-opening and almost laid a framework for me to, before I got really into Bitcoin. The second book I read was Safe's The Bitcoin Standard. And I just kind of felt like this book was going to be the first book to kind of, again, lay that foundation. And it's not a very benign book. I got my first Ben pun in there. It's not an easy read. It's not gentle. But it's would be my best. That or The Sovereign Individual would be my best non-Bitcoin books to recommend.
Love it. Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting about the Dalio thing. I think Bitcoin may be the thing that derails the thesis he's operating on there. But we'll see. We'll see. Anyways, gents, we'll round it out here. Thank you guys so much for coming. You're all awesome, and you're all welcome back anytime. We are Ben. We are Legion.
Expect us. He dropped it off. Good to see you, gents.
Yep.
Take care.
All right. Everybody, thank you guys so much for being here. Sorry, my internet kind of crapped out a little bit there for a second. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for being here. Of course, as always, like, subscribe, share, all those things. They help a ton getting this content in front of more eyeballs. You can also hit up the previously mentioned sponsors down below. Those were HodlHodl, CoinKite, Nunchuk, and Start9. If you really liked what you saw, you can do one of two things. You can head to my website, btcsessions.ca. There you can book me for private one-on-one sessions if you need some extra hand-holding. Or, again, if you really liked what you saw, you can scroll down a little bit. There is a Lightning or an LN URL that you can scan and send sats, or just click on it. It'll take you over to my Geyser Fund page, and you can toss over some sats there, which are always very appreciated. I always like the nice little comments and stuff that come with them. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful day or evening, wherever you may be. And I will see you guys next time for your daily session.
HODL the Bitcoin.